The gavel struck like thunder, its echo rattling through the packed courtroom, leaving silence heavy enough to choke. Ava Mercer sat rigid, her breath caught in her chest, as if the world had tilted against her. Daniel Cole whispered, "This changes everything," his steady voice masking fear beneath its calm. Across the room, Evelyn Drake's gaze never wavered, her expression unreadable, a velvet mask of control. Maya Quinn leaned forward, her sharp eyes darting, whispering to Lucas Hart, "Did you see her smile?" The jury shifted uneasily, their eyes restless with doubt. A phone vibrated on the polished wooden bench, slicing the silence with an ominous hum, and Ava reached instinctively but froze. Jude Mercer's face flashed in her mind, a memory haunting her every step. The weight of secrets pressed down, and the trial of the century had only just begun. Outside the courthouse, the crowd surged against the barricades, voices clashing in protest and defense, the noise like a living storm. Ava walked slowly down the steps, Daniel shielding her from flashing cameras. A reporter shouted, "Do you think justice will finally be served?" Ava's lips pressed tight, her silence heavier than words. Maya slipped unnoticed along the side, eyes scanning, sketchbook hidden under her arm. Lucas murmured, "This is just the beginning," as he guided them toward the waiting car. Evelyn's car rolled past the chaos, tinted windows sealing her in calculated calm, her eyes glinting in the shadows. A hand brushed against Ava's shoulder from the crowd, a fleeting contact that left her trembling. Somewhere in the chants, Jude's name was whispered like a ghost carried by the wind. The safe house smelled of stale coffee and restless nights. Ava sat at the table, untouched cup before her, steam curling like fading memories. Daniel said, "You need to prepare for tomorrow. The cross-examination will tear into you." She whispered, "I've lived with worse." Maya sprawled across the couch, sketching furiously, muttering, "They don't see the truth, they see what they want." Lucas leaned against the wall, arms folded, his voice steady but sharp, "We can't afford mistakes." The television in the corner flickered, Evelyn's polished voice filling the room from a press conference. "Justice," she declared, "is about perspective." Ava's hands trembled over the sealed letter she always carried, the weight of unread words pressing harder with each second. Jude's memory shimmered in her silence. Rain streaked the windows as Ava stared outside, the city glowing with neon reflections. Daniel paced behind her, repeating legal points, his voice low and urgent. "They'll press about the fire, about what you knew," he said. Ava turned, her eyes heavy. "I didn't escape. I survived." Maya broke in, slamming her sketchbook shut. "You're letting them define you. Fight back." Lucas remained quiet, but his gaze was sharp, reading Ava like a page half burned. The television repeated Evelyn's words, her image framed in power and grace. Ava whispered to the glass, "Every night I still hear him." Jude's name lodged in her throat. Thunder cracked, shaking the room like the echo of the gavel once more. Night deepened, the safe house cloaked in uneasy silence. Ava sat alone now, letter trembling in her hand, her thumb brushing its sealed edge, but never daring to open it. Daniel rested nearby, his head tilted back, exhaustion softening his resolve. Maya lay curled on the couch, sketchbook open to a page of Ava's face, lines fierce with unspoken truth. Lucas watched the door, steady as stone, his eyes betraying a burden he never shared. Evelyn's voice crackled faintly from a muted broadcast, her words distorted but her presence undeniable. Ava whispered, "Jude, if I had only..." Her voice cracked, dissolving into silence. The house seemed to breathe with her grief, the letter burning in her hand like a weight too heavy to release. Outside, the storm raged on. The morning light crept through the blinds, sharp stripes cutting across Ava's tired face as she sat at the kitchen table. Daniel placed files in front of her, his voice firm, "You need to be unshakable today." Ava whispered, "They will see me as weak, no matter what I say." Maya flipped through her sketchbook, muttering, "Weak? You're the only one carrying truth." Lucas leaned against the fridge, his arms crossed, eyes heavy with doubt. Evelyn's voice floated from the radio, smooth as silk, weaving a narrative that bent perception. "Truth is fragile," she declared. Ava pressed her palm against the sealed letter beside her, its weight like a stone chained to her soul. Jude's memory lingered, his laughter echoing faintly in her silence. The courthouse loomed like a fortress as Ava stepped from the car, her eyes narrowed against the blinding flashes of cameras. Reporters surged, shouting questions that clawed at her composure. Daniel held up his arm to shield her, his jaw set tight. Maya darted to the side, sketchbook pressed against her chest, observing faces in the crowd like a hunter of secrets. Lucas walked behind them, scanning each corner, his steady stride masking unease. Evelyn descended from her sleek car with a calm smile, every movement deliberate, her gaze cutting through the chaos. "Justice is not a battle," she told the reporters. "It is balance." Ava's breath caught, her heart racing as Jude's face appeared in a poster raised by the crowd, eyes frozen in eternal youth. Inside the courtroom, the hum of voices quieted as the judge entered, the weight of silence settling like a heavy curtain. Ava clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles pale, her pulse racing in her ears. Daniel whispered, "Focus only on what matters, nothing else." Maya scribbled furiously in her sketchbook, each line etched with frustration. Lucas adjusted his tie, his gaze flicking from jurors to Evelyn, his expression unreadable. Evelyn sat across the room, serene as a statue, her lips curved in the faintest smile that hinted at possession. The judge's gavel struck, and the trial resumed, the sound reverberating through the room, like a reminder that every secret was about to surface. Ava's eyes closed for a breath, Jude's laughter crashing against her memory. The first witness took the stand, a trembling man whose eyes darted like prey. He spoke haltingly, voice thin, "I saw her. I saw Ava there that night." The room gasped, tension thickening the air. Ava's fists clenched, her breath trapped as Daniel rose, his voice sharp. "Are you certain, or are you only repeating what you were told?" Evelyn's eyes glinted with satisfaction, her fingers brushing her chin like a conductor guiding the scene. Maya whispered, "He's lying," sketching furiously, her pencil breaking under pressure. Lucas shifted in his seat, his jaw grinding, betraying cracks in his calm. Ava stared at the man, her eyes burning, Jude's shadow hovering over the testimony like a ghost waiting to speak. The recess bell rang, releasing the tension for only a breath. Ava stepped into the hallway, her shoulders sagging under invisible weight. Daniel touched her arm, his tone low. "We dismantled his claim, but this is only the beginning." Ava whispered, "Every word feels like another nail." Maya paced near the wall, muttering, "They're building a story, not telling the truth." Lucas leaned on the marble pillar, silent, his eyes fixed on Evelyn at the far end of the corridor. Evelyn stood among reporters, her presence radiant, her smile crafted to perfection, every word dripping with control. "Justice must be shaped," she told them smoothly. Ava pressed her back against the wall, clutching the letter, Jude's memory whispering louder than ever in her silence. The courtroom air thickened as the next witness stepped forward, carrying a file like a weapon. He declared, "The evidence was tampered with." Gasps rippled, and Ava's breath faltered, her eyes fixed on the file. Daniel rose sharply, his voice ringing, "Show us how, not just what you claim." Evelyn folded her hands neatly, her calm a dagger cloaked in silk. Maya whispered to Lucas, "If this stands, everything falls apart." Lucas muttered back, "It's a setup and they know it." The judge's stern eyes swept the room, commanding silence. Ava's pulse raced, Jude's face flashing again, a reminder that the trial was more than testimony, it was survival. The tension cracked like glass, and the battle deepened. The jury leaned forward, their faces etched with unease, while the witness stumbled through his claims. Ava whispered, "They're building a wall I can't climb." Daniel replied firmly, "Then we'll tear it down." Maya scribbled lines across her sketchbook, the image of Evelyn emerging in sharp strokes. Lucas watched her hand tighten, murmuring, "You see more than they do." Evelyn, sensing eyes upon her, turned slightly, her smile small but cutting, as if control belonged only to her. The judge interrupted, demanding clarity, his voice booming. The witness faltered again, sweat shining under the lights. Ava lowered her head, Jude's memory whispering in her ears, fragile but piercing. The stakes rose with every breath. The recess ended, and tension returned heavier than before. Daniel placed a photograph on the table, his voice clear. "This image contradicts your testimony." The witness stammered, eyes darting, as the jury murmured among themselves. Ava's chest heaved, hope flickering like a fragile flame. Maya muttered, "Truth leaves marks, even if they hide them." Lucas whispered, "They won't let this go easily." Evelyn leaned forward, her hands clasped, her composure cracking for a fraction of a second. The judge demanded silence again, striking the gavel. Ava clutched the edge of the table, the photo burning into her mind, while Jude's laughter rang faintly, a cruel reminder of what had been lost. The cracks in the wall had begun to show. Later that night, the safe house was cloaked in silence, broken only by rain tapping the windows. Ava stared at the photo Daniel had revealed, whispering, "Proof should bring peace, but it only makes them fight harder." Daniel leaned over the table, his brow furrowed. "Every truth we show, Evelyn twists into doubt." Maya tossed her sketchbook down, frustration sharp. "She plays them like strings, and they never see it." Lucas stepped closer, his voice low. "Then we cut the strings." Thunder shook the building, and Ava closed her eyes, Jude's voice echoing again, fragile yet unrelenting. She whispered, "I'm drowning in ghosts." The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within, rising louder each moment. The following morning, the press swarmed outside the courthouse, chanting Ava's name in equal parts defense and accusation. She stepped forward, her chin lifted despite the weight pressing her down. Daniel walked at her side, whispering, "Strength is how they'll remember you." Maya darted through the crowd, sketching faces twisted in rage and hope. Lucas followed, shielding her flank, his eyes cold and unyielding. Evelyn appeared at the top of the steps, her presence magnetic, her voice ringing, "Justice's clarity." The crowd roared, torn between devotion and disdain. Ava froze for a heartbeat, Jude's face flickering again among the protest signs, his memory binding her to the fight she could not abandon. The courtroom hushed as a new witness entered, her steps deliberate, her face veiled in shadows of the past. Ava's breath caught, recognition clawing at her chest. Daniel leaned forward, whispering, "This changes everything." Evelyn's lips curved faintly, her calm control radiating like steel beneath silk. The woman raised her hand to swear the oath, her voice low but steady. "I knew Jude." The room erupted in gasps, and Ava's world tilted violently. Maya scribbled in a frenzy, her eyes wide, muttering, "She's the crack in the wall." Lucas shifted uncomfortably, his hands tightening on the bench. The gavel thundered, calling silence, but the secret had already detonated. Ava stared, her body trembling, as the past stormed back into the present. The witness continued, her words slicing through the silence. "He wasn't who you thought he was. Jude carried secrets." Ava shook her head, whispering, "No, that's a lie." Daniel stood, objecting, but the judge allowed her testimony. Evelyn folded her hands neatly, her composure unbroken, though her eyes gleamed with hidden fire. Maya's pencil broke under her grip, frustration snapping like a whip. Lucas leaned close, muttering, "This is a trap." Ava pressed her hand to the sealed letter, its weight unbearable now, as if demanding to be opened. The jury shifted, their eyes narrowing with curiosity and suspicion. Jude's memory burned brighter, reshaped by the stranger's words, haunting Ava with new unbearable questions. Outside the courtroom during recess, the storm brewed heavier than the sky above. Reporters swarmed the steps, their questions sharp as knives. Ava stood still, her hands clenched, her silence more powerful than answers. Daniel whispered urgently, "We must discredit her before she dismantles everything." Maya shouted suddenly, "She's lying!" Her voice cracked, startling those nearby. Lucas placed a steady hand on her shoulder, murmuring, "Control yourself, or you'll give them more fuel." Evelyn descended the steps slowly, her grace magnetic, declaring to the press, truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply buried. Ava's eyes filled with pain, Jude's name echoing like a wound reopened, the crowd roaring around her in chaos. Back inside, the trial resumed with heavier tension. Daniel rose, his voice sharp. "Tell the court why you hid this for so long." The witness faltered, eyes darting. "Because I was afraid of him." Ava's breath shattered, her whisper trembling. "Afraid of Jude?" Maya gasped, sketchbook sliding from her hands. Lucas muttered under his breath, "They're rewriting the past." Evelyn sat unmoving, her gaze steady, her silence more dangerous than words. The judge demanded order as the gallery erupted. Ava pressed her face into her hands, Jude's memory crashing against the testimony, distorted, unrecognizable. The letter felt heavier than ever, as if truth was locked inside it, screaming to be revealed. The day ended with silence, heavier than any verdict. Ava sat alone in the safe house, the letter trembling in her hand, her reflection blurred in the rain-streaked window. Daniel entered quietly, his voice low. "You don't have to open it yet," she whispered. "I already know it will break me." Maya sat curled in the corner, her eyes red from tears, whispering, "Secrets don't stay buried." Lucas stood near the door, his shadow tall, his silence unreadable. On the muted television, Evelyn's face filled the screen, declaring, "The truth has spoken." Ava's hand hovered over the seal, Jude's memory screaming in her silence. The storm outside thundered, as though demanding the past finally rise. The courtroom vibrated with tension as Daniel rose for cross-examination, his voice slicing through the silence. "Your story doesn't align with the evidence." The witness trembled, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Ava's pulse thundered, her gaze fixed on every flicker of movement. Maya whispered fiercely, "He's tearing her apart, sketching lines sharp as knives." Lucas leaned forward, murmuring, "This is our chance, but it won't end clean." Evelyn crossed her legs slowly, her expression unbroken, yet her grip on the pen in her hand tightened faintly. The judge's gavel rang, commanding restraint, but the storm of words had already erupted. Ava closed her eyes, Jude's laughter flickering, both a comfort and a torment, as truth clawed toward the surface. The witness broke suddenly, shouting, "I was told what to say." Gasps erupted like thunder across the courtroom. Ava froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. Daniel pressed, "By whom?" his voice sharp as steel. The woman stammered, her lips trembling, eyes flicking toward Evelyn. Silence fell heavy, all eyes snapping to the velvet blade. Evelyn smiled faintly, serene, unbothered, as though accusation slid off her skin like rain. Maya muttered, "She's untouchable," her pencil scratching frantic lines. Lucas whispered, "The mask is cracking." The gavel struck furiously, demanding order, but order had already shattered. Ava gripped the table, Jude's memory screaming like an echo refusing to die. The judge called for recess, but the room remained a battlefield of eyes and whispers. Ava stumbled into the hallway, her breath shallow, Daniel at her side urging, "This is the moment to fight harder." She whispered, "Every truth feels poisoned." Maya stormed ahead, sketchbook clutched like a weapon, muttering, "She can't erase what I see." Lucas leaned against a marble column, his gaze distant, shadows heavy in his eyes. Evelyn appeared at the far end of the hall, reporters swarming her, her voice smooth as glass. "Justice is not about who speaks loudest, but who controls the silence." Ava's knees weakened, Jude's name rising like a ghost in the crowd's chants, binding her tighter to the storm. That evening, the safe house was a storm within walls. Ava shouted, "They're rewriting him, twisting Jude into someone he wasn't." Her voice cracked, raw with grief. Daniel placed both hands on the table, stern. "Then we prove them wrong with evidence, not anger." Maya snapped back, "Evidence doesn't matter if they control the narrative." Lucas broke his silence, his voice cutting. "And what if they're right? What if Jude wasn't who you thought?" Ava recoiled, the words slicing deeper than any testimony. She whispered, "No, he was all I had." The letter trembled in her hand, its seal unbroken, its truth waiting like a blade. Outside, thunder cracked, mirroring the war inside. The next day, the courtroom braced for eruption. Evelyn rose, her voice smooth, commanding. "The truth is not what you see, but what endures." Her words wrapped around the jury like velvet chains. Daniel countered fiercely. "Truth cannot be bent into comfort. It stands unbroken." Ava trembled, her voice breaking as she whispered to herself, "Jude, guide me." Maya scribbled furiously, each line capturing Evelyn's mask cracking beneath her elegance. Lucas sat still, eyes down, his silence heavy, unreadable. The gavel struck, echoing like war drums as all sides collided in a storm of words and secrets. Ava's tears welled, the climax of the trial bearing down on her like fate itself. The gavel struck, announcing the final stretch of the trial. Ava sat rigid, every nerve screaming as the judge's voice filled the chamber. The jury will now deliberate. Daniel leaned close, whispering, "This is where everything weighs." Maya muttered, "They'll twist it." Lucas remained silent, his eyes fixed on Evelyn across the room. Evelyn rose gracefully, her calm composure sending shivers through the gallery. She said softly, "The truth has always been before you." Ava trembled, her hand brushing the sealed letter once more, the choice between silence and revelation pressing hard. Jude's laughter whispered faintly in her memory, binding her to this moment where resolution was no longer optional, only inevitable. In the jury room, voices clashed in heated debate. Some swore Ava was innocent, others claimed Evelyn's words proved control. Outside, Ava paced the safe house, whispering, "They're deciding who I am." Daniel sat, exhaustion etched into his face, saying, "You've given them everything." Maya slammed her sketchbook closed, shouting, "Not enough!" Lucas stood by the window, silent, watching rain streak down. On the muted television, reporters speculated wildly. Evelyn's name repeated like a chant. Ava touched the envelope again, her breath uneven, Jude's ghost louder than ever. She whispered, "The truth lives here." The storm outside grew darker, mirroring the storm within. The jury returned, their footsteps echoing like a drum beat of fate. Ava rose slowly, her knees weak, Daniel steadying her. Evelyn's eyes gleamed, her stillness more powerful than words. Maya whispered, "They've decided," her voice breaking with fear. Lucas muttered, "No verdict is clean?" Thorperson stood, trembling papers in hand, and declared, "We find the defendant." Silence consumed the room, every heart held hostage. Ava closed her eyes, Jude's face flashing clear, his memory now a question that demanded truth. The gavel poised to strike, resolution hanging in the balance, heavier than the storm outside. The verdict thundered, "Not guilty." The room erupted in gasps, some cheering, others cursing. Ava collapsed back into her chair, her tears falling freely, though her relief was hollow. Daniel whispered fiercely, "You survived this war." Maya shouted, "No, truth was drowned." Lucas stayed still, his eyes locked on Evelyn, whose faint smile never faltered. She whispered to herself, "Control is victory." Ava clutched the letter, trembling, knowing resolution did not equal peace. Jude's memory filled her, haunting, his voice echoing with questions unanswered. The gavel struck again, silencing the uproar, sealing a verdict that changed everything, but explained nothing. That night, Ava sat alone at the safe house table, the sealed letter before her. Rain hammered the glass, lightning flickering across her face. She whispered, "Justice is only a word." Daniel rested asleep on the couch, drained from battle. Maya stared blankly at her sketchbook, pages filled with faces twisted in pain. Lucas stood by the door, silent, watching Ava with unreadable eyes. On the muted TV, Evelyn smiled in triumph, her voice muted but her power undeniable. Ava pressed her thumb to the seal, trembling, whispering, "Jude, tell me who you really were." The storm roared louder, the letter's silence heavier than any verdict. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed in gray silence. Ava walked alone down the courthouse steps, the sealed letter still clutched in her hand. Reporters called her name, their voices muted by the fog in her mind. Daniel followed at a distance, his exhaustion heavy, his words unspoken. Maya whispered, "They think it's over, but it isn't." Lucas stayed near the edge of the crowd, his eyes fixed on Evelyn, who watched from her car with calm composure. Evelyn's faint smile met Ava's trembling stare, a reminder that battles never truly end. Ava whispered to herself, justice was never the answer. The letter grew heavier, as though demanding truth she feared to face. In the safe house, Ava sat at the table, the envelope before her like a relic of war. Daniel said softly, "You don't need to open it." She replied, "Not opening it is worse." Maya leaned forward, whispering, "Secrets don't rot, they spread." Lucas stood in shadow, his silence pressing against the walls. Evelyn's image filled the muted television, her voice unheard but her power clear. Ava's hand trembled as she touched the seal, tears slipping down her face. She whispered, "Jude's name," her voice breaking, as if calling him back from memory. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her choice. Midnight fell, and Ava wandered the rain-slick streets, the envelope in her pocket, each step echoing like judgment. Neon lights reflected in puddles, painting her face in fractured colors. Daniel called after her, but she didn't turn. Maya followed at a distance, whispering to herself, "She's chasing ghosts." Lucas stood beneath a street lamp, watching silently, his shadow stretching long. Evelyn's figure appeared at the corner, her calm presence cutting through the night. She whispered, "The truth belongs to those who hold it." Ava froze, her breath shallow, her grip on the envelope fierce. Jude's laughter seemed to rise from the wet pavement, haunting, unrelenting. Back in her apartment, Ava placed the envelope on the table, staring at it under the flicker of a single bulb. Daniel stood at the doorway, pleading, "Don't let it destroy you." Maya whispered, "It already has." Lucas muttered, "Once it's open, there's no turning back." Evelyn's voice, faint from the radio, declared, "Truth is not justice, it is power." Ava pressed her fingers to the seal, her breath uneven, tears streaking her cheeks. She whispered, "Jude, forgive me." The silence pressed in like a final verdict, the letter's weight threatening to collapse her. The bulb flickered again, shadows shifting like restless memories. Dawn broke, casting pale light across the table where the envelope lay unopened. Ava sat motionless, her eyes hollow, her hands limp at her sides. Daniel slept in a chair nearby, exhaustion claiming him. Maya stared out the window, whispering, "The truth never stays hidden." Lucas stood by the door, his shadow long in the morning light. On the muted television, Evelyn smiled faintly, her face framed in power. Ava whispered a single line into the silence, her voice fragile but haunting. "Justice was never mine to hold." The letter remained sealed, its secrets intact, as the weight of the story lingered like a wound that would never heal.